Come on, Mr. Chet, come on in.
Hi, Ebony. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I'm trying to share. What I'm doing, Ebony, is I have a program about diabetes. The reason I'm doing this is that I've had diabetes since 1981, so I've had some experience with it. What happened a few years ago is that I was in Chicago during the week when Ron Santo was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. During that week, there were a lot of stories about him, and it turned out that he had diabetes during the 1960s. He was afraid the Cubs would fire him if they found out, so he kept it a secret. Well, a situation happened that was really powerful that I share with people. Before I tell you what the incident was, you need to know a little bit about diabetes. Most of us know that high blood sugars are what really cause the damage in diabetics, but low blood sugars can be a problem as well. If you use insulin or take certain type 2 medications, you can have very low blood sugars. The reason it's a problem is that your brain, unlike other tissues in the body, it doesn't store glucose. It takes it directly from the bloodstream for energy. When there isn't enough sugar in the blood, the brain starts to go haywire. Things can happen like you start sweating, you lose your coordination, you can lose it badly enough that you can pass out. You might see double and triple. It's just all these things can happen because you don't have enough glucose feeding your brain.
Right,
Luckily, it's easy to fix. All you need to do is eat something sugary. And when the blood sugar level comes back up, the brain comes back online and things get back to normal.
right,
So it's an easy fix, but it's nothing to ignore. You have to take care of it if it happens. So, having explained that, here's the story. Santos in a game in Chicago. It's the last of the ninth. Cubs are up. There's two outs. They're down by two, and there's two men on base. So the batter is at the plate, and Santa was in the on deck circle, and he felt the symptoms of low blood sugar coming on. So he just prayed that the guy at the plate would make an out to retire the side so he could get back to the dugout and eat his candy bar before the manager realized that he had diabetes.
mm,
Well, instead of making it out, the batter walked. So now it's two down, two outs, down by two. But bases are now loaded.
mm-hmm.
Santa walked. Santa walked up to the plate. He said he looked up to see three pitchers, three scoreboards, 30 some odd people standing out in the field. When the pitcher threw the ball, it looked like it had a slinky attached to the back of it. So he took a crack at it, connected, and put it out of the park for a walk-off grand slam home run. So he made it around the bases and back to the dugout in time to eat his Snickers bar. And nobody knew that happened for 10 years when he
Mm,
finally made it public. And he came out and admitted that he had diabetes. But that was after a career where he had 5 Golden Gloves. He'd been in a bunch of All Star games. So at that point, nobody was going to fire Ron Santo because he had diabetes. Anyway, I came home and I started telling that story. And that's when I realized how poorly most people understand diabetes,
right,
including a lot of diabetics. But I surprised myself too. I have type 1, so I could explain that because I'd lived with it for all those years. But people ask me about type 2 as well. And what I discovered is that the things I believed were untrue.
right,
And that's when I realized that if I don't get it, then nobody gets it. There's a real problem with people believing untrue things about diabetes and diabetics. So when I understood that, I decided that nobody is trying to fix this problem. I'm retired, so I'm going to take it on as my retirement project,
right.
and that's what I'm doing. I've written books. I've developed a diabetes course uh, that I've been teaching in participation with Bayside Medical Center, which is a big medical center here in Massachusetts.
Okay.
University of Massachusetts, Springfield College, the YMCA. So they've been enabling me to do this program. That was until COVID hit. When COVID hit, everything just blew up. So all of a
Right.
sudden, you weren't doing anything for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But during that time is when podcasting came up. And I started looking into podcasting, and it dawned on me that I can reach a whole lot more people doing this than
Mm-hmm.
I can by giving classes to 10 or 15 people at a time.
Right.
So that's really what I'm focused on right now. Before we go any farther, I'd like to just explain what diabetes is and how it operates. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, um, diabetes is a disease that causes high blood sugars. The reason high blood sugars are dangerous is that they damage your entire body, your cardiovascular system, your eyesight, kidneys. I mean, everything gets impacted by high blood sugars. The way to look at this is to ask yourself what happens when you mix sugar into a glass of water. If you stir it in, the water gets sticky.
Hmm.
Well, when you have too much sugar in your blood, that's exactly what's happening to your bloodstream. You've got sticky blood going through your whole body, and it builds up on your blood vessel walls and every other part of your body. So that's why it's dangerous. If you keep chronically having high blood sugars, you will be damaging your body. And if you don't do anything about it, it'll eventually kill you. It is a fatal disease if you don't treat it. So, number one, people have to realize that. But let me explain to you how normal bodies work. When a person without diabetes eats something, it gets digested into glucose. Glucose is just a simple sugar. I use the term sugar and glucose interchangeably because they really are the same thing.
Hmm.
The glucose gets in the blood and it goes to all your body's cells. When the glucose is in there, your pancreas senses it and it releases a hormone called insulin. Insulin's job is to act as a key that unlocks the cell walls to allow the glucose to get in.
Right.
So the right amount of insulin gets out there, the cell walls open, and the glucose moves from the bloodstream into the cells. So two things happen. One, the cells get the energy they need, but also the glucose leaves the bloodstream. So you no longer have high blood sugar.
Right.
So that's the natural way things work. With diabetics, that process doesn't work anymore. In my case, with type 1, I've got an autoimmune disease that kills off the insulin producing cells in the pancreas. So my body doesn't make insulin. So people like me, we have to take insulin. It's by injection because insulin gets broken down in digestion, so you can't take it orally. So, so type 1 is pretty straightforward. Type 2 is a different disease, though. Type 2s have a condition called insulin resistance. And what that means is just what the term says. It makes your cells resistant to insulin.
Right.
So, and it gets worse over time. So, you start off having to produce more insulin to let the glucose into the cells. But over time, because it gets worse, you have to produce more and more and more insulin to the point where the pancreas loses its capacity to produce the insulin. By the time you're diagnosed with high blood sugar, you've already lost about half the pancreas's ability to produce it. So they're two different diseases. They're both called diabetes because they both result in high blood sugars, but they're handled differently.
Right.
So that's my boilerplate explanation. At least, I think with that explanation, people who heard it probably know more about diabetes than 90% of the people out there, because people really generally don't really understand what it is. What's even worse is that people often think that diabetics got it because of what they did personally. Either you're overweight or you're sedentary or you ate too much sugar.
Hmm.
People typically think that they brought the disease on themselves, and that includes a lot of diabetics themselves. But what really happens in both cases is that it begins when a genetic predisposition encounters something in the environment that triggers it. So when that happens, you'll either have the autoimmune disease that I have, or you'll have the insulin resistance. Now, if you don't have insulin resistance, it doesn't matter how much you weigh or what you eat,
Hmm.
you're not going to become diabetic. In fact, most overweight people never become diabetic. If you look at the National Institutes of Health data, they tell you about 70% of us are overweight, but only about 10 to 15% of us have diabetes.
Right.
So if being overweight really caused diabetes, why would that be?
Right.
Another thing is that a lot of thin people who watch their weight and exercise also become diabetic.
Hmm.
So the idea that you bring it on yourself really doesn't hold water.
Not at all.
But people still think that. And because of that, a lot of diabetics, they carry guilt and shame because they themselves believe that they brought it on. In fact, when I was doing the in-person courses, the best things that happened to me were after the course was over, people would come up to me and say, Chet, the best thing you told me is that I didn't cause this, because you can see the guilt just drip off their faces. It's a big deal because people carry that guilt, and they feel bad about it, and they don't want to talk about it. They feel ashamed, and that just adds insult to injury.
Right.
What I'm trying to do is get everybody educated, to the basics, so they all know that, so that diabetics who fight the disease, which is very hard to do, get respect.
Of
And at this,
course.
and at the same time, if you're going to respect the diabetics who are fighting it, we also want to motivate those people who have it but don't fight it to
Mhm.
take it seriously,
Right.
because there is a big, big problem with diabetes out there. And if like I said, if you don't take care of it, it will kill you. I mean, we have got to get that message out.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely. So, one of my first questions to you would be, so say if, like an individual, I'm gonna use one rapper as an example. There is a rapper, his name is Boosie, and a lot of
Mhm.
people were saying like he makes a Kool-Aid or whatever, and they don't know how what would you call it, like diabetes work. They don't understand how it works and the
Yeah.
processes of it, and why a person like him would say, I need Kool-Aid.
Well, it's interesting you would bring that up,
Hmm.
because a black friend of mine and I were talking about diabetes, and he understood, what was going on here.
Hmm.
And he turned to me and said, Chet, you wouldn't believe how much sugar we put in Kool-Aid.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, I'd never heard that before. But what I did for a while, I mean, I interact with a lot of people from different races,
Right, of course.
black people included.
Hmm.
And I made it a habit of asking people, gee, what can you tell me about Kool-Aid? And I was amazed that my friend was right. Guys had all these recipes. I got to put the water in the refrigerator for 6 hours, and then you got to put the Kool-Aid in, then you mix in the sugar. I mean, they had these really involved ways of making Kool-Aid,
Right.
but they all involved massive amounts of sugar.
Sugar. Hmm.
Well, see, once you have pre-diabetes, you should not be drinking that kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, this is pretty basic stuff, because
Hmm.
I mean, there are people that I've met who will drink 2 liters of sugar soda a day. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
even for a non-diabetic person, this isn't good to do. But for a diabetic, this is really dangerous.
Right.
So, I mean, even if we got the word out enough that people started doing the really over the top bad stuff,
Right.
you would help them tremendously.
Of course, of course. Another question I would ask, like, so if someone like me, now I have an autoimmune myself, I have what you call hyper, um, it's like hyperactive thyroid,
Okay.
Graves' disease, should I say? Now, me, they always say we think you're pre-diabetic because of certain things that I might say. I might say, like I can't go a day or two without having some type of sugar, or I feel like, I don't know, not like a crash and burn, but like
Yeah.
I just don't have the I guess like if I haven't eaten a lot, or if I'm struggling, or whatever the situation may be. And I say the only thing that I'm wanting is something with sugar in it. And they'll test me and they'll say something like, where we think you're pre-diabetic, but however, your levels are just normal, but it might just be because of the lack of whatever nutrients that your body is receiving to push out certain hormones. Like I have stopped eating certain foods,
Hmm.
so now my body is like trying to figure out like what are you doing to me? How can I get that sugar rush? Or
Yeah.
staying away from caffeine. Like I do not drink anything with caffeine in it, because first off, it gives you bad diarrhea, and most
Hmm.
people they'd be like, it helps me lose weight. No, what you're doing is causing yourself to have diarrhea.
Yeah.
Really, really bad, especially if you're having like caffeinated coffee, decaffeinated as well, just sugary drinks that they won't tell you. Like I took nutrition in college. I just graduated last year from
Hmm.
Post University. And that was my thing. I took nutrition. I was like, well, if I'm going to have this autoimmune disease and it comes and it goes, sometimes I can go a year or two without taking medicine. And then sometimes I can go a year or two, like right now, I'm back on the medicine.
Thyroid.
Yes. So, with me having like the autoimmune disease, my body is okay, you sugar, but you're trying to be, I guess, necessarily healthy.
Hmm.
What could a person like me, even if I'm not a diabetic, what could I do to like not resist the sugar, but like it's okay to have X amount of this, or what could a person like me to prevent having, I guess, type two?
Well, yeah, this is another complicated thing about diabetes. I mentioned about insulin resistance being the underlying cause. Well, you've heard the term prediabetes. Prediabetes means that you have insulin resistance and your blood sugars are getting higher, but they're not high enough to be called diabetes. So, they aren't different diseases. Prediabetes and diabetes are just different benchmarks.
Right,
Prediabetes is a lower amount of blood sugar, diabetes is a higher amount of blood sugar. So, in a technical sense, to prevent diabetes, you would reduce the amount of sugar you ate and carbohydrates, and you would eat more protein and things that aren't going to raise your blood sugar. Um, but as far as preventing insulin resistance goes, which is the thing to watch out for, we don't even know why it starts. It may start in lots of different ways. We just don't know. So it's the same thing with the autoimmune disease. You probably don't know what you did to get your autoimmune disease. They just happened for some reason.
clue. I think it's
Well,
hereditary. That's what I've been told.
well, with diabetes, that's what they have told us. It is hereditary. In fact, there was just a study done by the University of Massachusetts. They identified over 200 genes that are associated with type 2 diabetes. So we know the genetics are out there. So unfortunately, with insulin resistance, all you can do is hope that you don't hit the trigger.
Right.
If you have the genetic makeup and you hit the trigger, then you're going to get it. You can't really prevent it. But as I was saying, once you get the insulin resistance, if you can do the things that it takes to keep your blood sugar low, you can avoid having it high enough to be called diabetes. And if I got to make
Hmm.
one other point for you,
Right.
um, you know, doctors can very easily tell whether you've got prediabetes or not. There's a blood test that they ought to be running routinely, and they can tell you either it's over that threshold or it's not. So that's something that they ought to be able to tell you for sure,
Right.
without guessing at whether you've got prediabetes or not. Yeah.
So, um, what advice would you give? Um, I would say mothers are about to give birth, and I know you've heard about the what
Yeah.
could they do to not say prevent, but just keep it at a pregnancy called gen. I cannot pronounce
Gestational diabetes.
it. Yes, that. So, what do you think they could do, and anyone else that is maybe wanting to conceive, or just regular you know everydayers?
Yeah, I'm not a medical person, so I really can't give you medical advice
Right,
on that. What I can tell you is that pregnancies used to be really, really dangerous for diabetic women. In fact, back in the day, they would recommend against diabetic women even conceiving because it was so dangerous. Today, it's not that way. If you get good medical help, there are lots of diabetic women who give birth to healthy babies. One thing I do know about gestational diabetes is that it tends to disappear after you have the child, but it makes you more likely to get type 2 diabetes in the future. And past that, those are the things that I know for sure are true, and I don't want to be venturing into territory that I really don't know.
Right, of course.
But it's certainly a much more positive thing for women today than it was in the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So this, I want to say thank you. I would love for you to shout out maybe site and
sure.
give them tips about they can do to regulate their blood sugar.
Well, what I've done is on my website, I've got some videos available. They're not free, but they are cheap. You can spend $4.99 and get a pretty good background of the kinds of things that we just talked about here.
Absolutely.
I would recommend they go there because at the very least, Ebony, they would get the information that you and I just talked about, and they will be better educated than most people out there.
Absolutely.
So I would strongly recommend that. Um, if you don't do something like that where the main facts are presented in an easy to understand way, you can read lots of things. You can read magazines, books. I mean, there's information all over the place, but it'll take you a while to figure it out. So that's a shortcut to some sort of knowledge. Yep, it's challengediabetes.us.